Greetings, great. Welcome to what I hope will be a fun end of the day session. I've got the unadvantageous position of actually doing the boring bit, and Gary and Curtis here will be doing the exciting piece. So I wanted to kick off. I'm Stephen Rhind-Tutt from Coherent Digital, and the three of us all believe really, really strongly that the wild web, the open internet, is actually much more important than it's being given credit for in the academic community. So I want to start with an image. Anybody know what this image is? Anyone? It's from an authoritative source, right? The National Science Foundation. So this actually is an image of the internet from 1998. And you'll note, it doesn't have a DOI, it doesn't have an ISBN, there's no ORCID or RAW or any other of the apparatus that the library community's created. And yet, this particular object is cited all over the place. You'll find it in 24 kilobit versions. You'll find it in 8.5 TIFF files. And one should ask, it's kind of interesting because it does really represent something quite important. Shouldn't we be paying more attention to it? So let's start with a definition. Of late, in my free time, I've been reading about gray literature and the literature about gray literature. And every book I've read so far spends at least a chapter on the definition of what gray literature is. The very fact that there's so much confusion about what gray literature is should give you a hint that maybe it's not that useful a term insofar as there's so much material that can be classified under it. I prefer the term wild content. And that's because much of gray literature actually, when it's tamed, when it's put into catalogs, when it's put into books, kind of ceases to be gray, it becomes formal. In my work, there seems to be four areas where content is wild. The first is indeed classical gray literature, technical reports, statistics, theses, dissertations, things that I think most people would recognize as gray literature. The second large bucket is primary sources. 20 years ago, there was very few sources openly available of manuscripts, letters, materials from the humanities. But they're ubiquitous at this point. So primary sources have suddenly emerged as a huge area of wild content. Some of this material done by universities and libraries, but a lot of it done by amateurs, and yet nonetheless it's very useful and used in the academy. The third area, which I won't have time to go into, is open learning and educational resources. There's an absolute plethora of tools around open learning. And most of these are actually banked in syllabi, in libguides. They're heavily used in the academy, yet in most OPACs, they're not that clear, they're not that open. And then the last is the internet. My colleague Toby recently presented a faculty a report from pertaining to the Ukraine conflict. An academic had done a 48 Twitter thread with citations and a great deal of information about the Ukrainian conflict. When asked why he didn't do it in a journal, he said, "Why would I? I've got 300,000 followers. They'll all be reading what I write tomorrow, first thing. I will get far more kudos. I don't have to argue with anybody. I can put it out. It will be accessible to all." So with those four categories in mind, let's take a look at the landscape overall. So this is an outline of some kinds of materials. So let's start with the blue. The blue means electronic tame. So that's where librarians and academics have had their fingerprints all over the content. This is the material with DOIs. This is the material that's properly cataloged and available in OPACs. And by and large, and I'm sorry you don't have detailed data, this is more of an opinion slide, than a totally accurate slide. But by my estimates, I've seen data around 90+% of journals now are electronic. There's a few journals that stay in print. I heard there's a maritime journal that still hasn't gone electronic. And then there's some journals which are just out there. They're not really journals. They're wild. As we go down, though, you start to see more and more new media that really the percentage of content that's actually properly cataloged or available in a tame format is really, really low. This orange, this electronic wild content, really represents an opportunity for librarians. This is where help is needed. This is where content is being lost. So let's take a look at the first of these, gray literature. So I've done a lot of research. As some of you perhaps know, we have a database, Policy Commons, which does have gray literature in it. We spent a great deal of time looking at the underlying data. An Australian academic ranked the amount of research published gray at $22 billion a year. It's really, really significant. In sharp contrast to what many people think, most of this goes through a form of peer review. Brookings and Cato do not want their reputation sullied by poor publications. Academics from Yale, academics across the world, have their own reputations to be wary about. It's huge. We're not quite sure, but we think it's at least 10% of journal output, and it might be as much as 25%. It covers all subject areas. If you look at a magazine like The Economist and the New York Times cite think tanks far more frequently than they do journals. This is important material that needs to be kept. As far as faculty is concerned, this graphic here from another Australian study is around social scientists. 81% of social scientists ranked reports as important. That number is actually higher than journal articles. And that may be because the content's really, really current. It may be because they can discover things in it that aren't yet in the journal literature, and their publications then will actually bring this into the scholarly discourse. Another data point. Recently, last year, there was the COPD Summit on climate change. Yale put out most important reports to read for this summit. 11 of them were gray literature reports. Only one was a journal. And this being my lens, I've actually been watching at this conference. I've seen Ithaca cited over and over again, and SSP and the Scholarly Kitchen and INFOdjs, and all of these are wild content. They're not properly cataloged in the same way that one would expect books and journals. Having said all of that, this material is really hard to work with. It's scattered all over the place. There's very little metadata. Quite often a gray literature report will have no author, no publication date. The title is really difficult to guess because it's in 20 languages, and you don't know which language you should choose. Sometimes authors are actually not cited, but they have a thanks to or we appreciate the contributions from on a list of 50 individuals. How does one actually process that with library standards? The material is highly impermanent. Policy Commons has been going a little bit longer than 2 years. In that time period, we've identified over 500 inactive organizations. They're like flowers. They blossom when they get funding. They have a beautiful time when everyone's interested, and then gradually they wither and disappear. Not very good for building on the shoulders of giants. So what can we do about this? Well, we're going to hear from Curtis and Gary about some openly available tools. And last and not least, I really want to suggest that it's the library community that can do best for this. All the things that librarians know really well how to do. Metadata, preservation, sharing, making trusted materials. This is where your help is really, really needed. A lot of the work, Scientific American, there's not a lot left in terms of citation needs for a source like Scientific American. But the output of many important organizations is simply not getting the same level of attention. So with this, I'm going to turn over.
Hello. My microphone works.
All right, so I'm Curtis Michelson, and
I'm Gary Price.
And we started a little company together called INFOdj. We only have 2 slides here. That's us, and we're kind of a bespoke innovation research company, and we're finding that many companies in the corporate side are finding this information and these resources extremely valuable. It's not just for academics, it's for corporates too. And Gary started a collection, which we're going to basically take just a subset of this collection. It's called Open Web Tools. And these are tools that are just really delighting our customers. And I think we just think if they were out there and you could help tell this story and share these tools with your colleagues, there's many, many uses of them. So as Stephen said, the location of these and discovering them is a challenge. We hope we're part of that solution. So we are going to show this database, our little database of web tools. If you want to get access to it, there it is. You can just take a snap of that right now, take a picture, and that should go right to our Open Web Tools
And for
link.
those of you watching on videos, it's bit.ly/wiggly-web.
Right. Nod to Devo there, Wiggly Web, and nod to you. So we say wiggly because a lot of the content you're going to see here is very dynamic. It's a lot of data sets, and they're visualizations and interactive visualizations. So let me go right to this. This is our home page, landing page for this content. And Gary, I'm just going to scroll it, and
Right.
Why don't you talk about how you decided to start this project?
So for years, 20 years, some of you might remember if you've been doing it for that long, back in 2001, I co-authored a book called The Invisible Web. I've been fascinated with exactly what Stephen talked about. I got to meet Stephen through all of this. And there's this incredible amount of content, like Stephen said, that's on the open web that often goes unnoticed and unused. For lack of a better expression, if it doesn't show up in those first 5 Google results, for most people, not those of you in this room, for the people that you work with and support, it might as well be invisible. Curtis said to me a couple of years ago, Gary, you're sharing all these great resources, whether it be at a presentation or on infodocket.com or now the ARL Day in Review that I compile every day. Could you just put them in one place and maybe add some metadata?
That's what we did.
And that's what you're looking at. So right now there's about 500 in here, but I am constantly adding new ones, and we would welcome your suggestions.
In fact, yeah, there's a link at the top. If you click here, that'll go to our website. You can find us there. We do want this to be an open project. And in fact, many of these projects are open collaborative projects. We have categories. So just for example, I think, Gary, we have a tag called collaborative.
Right. And I should say, too, our definition for the sake of this collection, open is the end user does not have to encumber any cost to get to it. Is it open in terms of CC0? In some cases, yes. Is it OER type of material? In some cases, yes. But the underlying idea here is that these resources, in 99% of the time, the end user can get to without having to take out a credit card to access the resource.
Right. So these are just some collaborative projects, wiki style. So we've picked some tools today that try to map to some of the work that Stephen's been doing in Canada lately and your Africa Commons. So, because we won't have time for 479. So this is maybe our 9 favorites here today.
I can talk fast, but not that
okay.
fast.
All right.
Okay.
First one, speaking of Canada, this is
Geodesy.
Geodesy.
This comes from a bunch of organizations, as you could see at the bottom, including the University of British Columbia in Canary. This is a tool that allows you to, and this is using interesting technology. This allows you, as Curtis will show you, to search for data sets using a map. Is this familiar to anybody here? It's it's several years old. So it's useful data sets, and it's using some interesting technology by searching for specific locations. So I believe you're going to zoom in on Toronto.
Let me zoom. I think there's something good in Toronto. Let's see.
Just keep letting you zoom. You zoom into a location, and he'll click search here.
Yeah, we have canned these searches, so we know there's some good stuff here. So we're going to search here.
So it's searching the outline of the map, the area, the physical location in the map.
Right. And so it's really a meta collection of geocoded projects. And these are kind of digital humanities projects, interesting stuff. You can limit it by source repository. So if we just wanted to look at stuff coming out of the University of Toronto Dataverse, for example, the Don Valley Historical Mapping Project, you can get information on that. You can limit by place and subject. But you can see that the queries here are constrained by this bounding box, this area.
I remember years ago, Ask.com, when I was doing some work for them, they allowed you to search. They were one of the first organizations to allow you to search using this type of technology, to search using a map and just search inside of the boundary of the map.
Mm-hmm. I recall there was one, the Lost Breweries, so there's an example. So you can see the bounding rectangle and you can get information on that project.
So for teetotalers, we've got the Lost Breweries of Toronto.
Okay.
Okay.
We're rolling well. That's web tool number 1. Next, another ode to Canada. Oh, Canada.
Oh, Canada. This comes out of the University of Toronto. This is the work of a librarian there who has created this interactive database. The amount of data the librarian has put on these pages is unbelievable. So obviously you can search, you can browse. So let's find, does anybody have a suggestion for their favorite Canadian film director we can click on?
Yeah, any Canadian film fans? Number 60. Okay. Let's see. I don't know where number 60 is, but you were
Okay.
throwing me a curveball there. Who's your favorite Canadian woman?
Why don't we talk about Sarah Polley?
All right. I think she's one of their featured.
Right.
Okay. Why do you like Sarah Polley?
She's in one of very depressing movie, but in this great movie that was made in the mid-90s called The Sweet Hereafter. Have you ever seen that movie? You need several pieces of Kleenex and put your head on the pillow afterwards. And she has gone on, she was a very young child, she has gone on to be, as you'll see here, a major force in Canadian arts, not just films. But look at all of the data that's been assembled in one place on this one particular person. So again, this is a database of Canadian female film directors that was put together by a librarian.
Mm-hmm. But wait, there's more data.
But there's more.
Why don't we go to Reasonator and learn more about Sarah Polley?
Happy 10th birthday this week to Wikidata.
Yay.
Assembling all these incredible data sets. Wikidata is, for those of us who don't code, me, is Wikidata for dummies. They've taken all of the material from the disparate data sets and kind of created a really nice interface for those of us who don't code to get access to a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll search for Sarah. There we go. Look at the amazing amount of material it's going to bring back. So we find her specific entry.
So we'll disambiguate here, and we go to her core record.
Not only is this wonderful in many cases for ready reference, if you like, fast fact type of questions. So as we scroll down, we get all this information from all these disparate data sets put together on one specific page. Unbelievable material. But what really geeks the librarian types out and the metadata types out is what's on the right side. This page has been built using a lot of the data.
Hold your mic.
A lot of the material on this page has been built using all of these disparate data sets.
It's really a linked data project, right?
So everything from VIAF to WorldCat identities, it just goes on and on. With one click for every entry in Reasonator, you can go directly to that data set for that specific organization, person, and so forth by simply clicking. So if for no other reason, this is a kind of what we're doing with Open Web Tools, a database of databases. To a certain degree, this is also by itself a database of databases. So you can click on any of those and go directly to that material.
And the timeline is pretty cool, too.
And there's also an interactive timeline for a lot of the people as well, or organizations.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Web tool number 2. Let's go.
How are we doing on time?
We're doing great.
Okay.
All right.
Again, not the most uplifting resource, but an important one. And these are some of the various resources, interactive tools in some cases, that the ADL makes available. Everything from a heat map to the hate crime map.
Let's do heat map first.
Okay.
Just take a peek at it.
Let's take a peek. So it gives you access to all of the data that this particular organization is compiling.
So total incidents, I mean, horrible stuff.
Yeah.
Terror plots.
The other database that we saw there goes to what Stephen was talking about by primary sources.
Yeah.
It actually, go back to that.
Yes, all right.
No problem.
Where is it? Heat map,
Go
might
to
be down.
Go to resources.
Thank you, Gary. Tools to track.
Right.
There we go, thanks.
And then the hate crime map, for example, will provide you with basic laws for every state and give you a direct link to that particular source. This and everything that we're sharing today goes along with what Stephen said. This is valuable, important material, but if it doesn't show up in those first few Google results, for most people, not you guys, it's going to be invisible. We have a role to be curating and organizing this information, to be sharing it with people. The other thing that as I said earlier, most of these resources, at least on the Open Web Tools site, are free to the end user. So we're curating for quality. And one thing that we hear about a lot in higher ed and academic libraries is working with your communities, working with the K12. This is valuable, credible material that I'm going to take a stab here and that a lot of teachers don't know about. They don't even have a concept that this stuff exists. And if any academic library wants to be vital to their community, starting by reaching out to the K12 world, where all we have to let them know is that these things exist, there's no cost to them or to the students to get access to it.
Right. For young law students or pre-law, this is an amazing resource. Right, absolutely. That's great. Along the same lines of laws and litigation, there's another interesting open web tool.
As you can see from the London School of Economics and the organization, the Grantham Organization for Climate Change. Here, this is a database where they are assembling, two authoritative organizations are assembling data, direct links to climate change laws, and I believe legal cases as well. So you can see right there, if you type in offshore wind, you will get information from various countries as well as litigation currently going on involving offshore wind.
Plus climate targets. So country-specific targets for offshore wind in this case. But let's look at laws and policies.
Credibility is so important, and it's really great to know, especially if you're going to go out and share these with other people, that these two global organizations are taking the time to curate it, and there's no charge.
So just for instance, Offshore Wind Energy Act of Germany, you get a sense
These are the types of things two businesses really find very useful, and they're not going to most likely know about them as well.
A client of ours recently found this very helpful, right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource. Okay,
What's next?
4 down. This one's fun. Let's go back up, a little happier theme, music.
I'll let you take this one. This comes from the work of Ellen Lomax. And if you've never seen this, Curtis just spent a little bit of time this afternoon getting to know this. It is unbelievable. Go ahead.
I mean, you might say it'd be an ethnomusicologist playground, but it's much more than that. And they've really been building this project for years. In fact, there was a PLOS article published here in PLOS recently.
Today. Yeah, it was published yesterday. It was published yesterday. A detailed academic journal article about the history of this database and all sorts of interesting information. There you go.
Right. Right, so amazing. But they've been growing it over a decade and kind of a sleeping little beautiful gem here. So one cool thing, find your musical roots. So my family, part of my family hails from Sweden, another from Cuba. So I just, followed the little path here, and it looks like they have a partner, City Lore, and it's presented in partnership. And by the way, the organization is the Association for Cultural Equity. So as we compile and aggregate these open web tools, we do always look at source. We look and make sure this is solid. So it's a nonprofit, and they're funded by, who was it? NEH, the usual
right.
Mellons, and so it's really reliable stuff. So this is fun, so you can kind of discover your roots, so you can kind of fill out a little form, but I think it's just as interesting to browse it by country. So I'm just gonna go to the switcher here, and we'll say browse by country, And so let me put in Cuba this way. Anyone else have family from Cuba? Cuba! Okay, here we go. And then you can step through those songs.
It's important to realize, too, well, samba as we... But one of the things I'm personally interested in is how we can find non-textual material in a lot of these open web tools. Again, the non-textual, the audio, the video is even more of a challenge for the average user to find, and tools like this are just incredibly vital and interesting and useful and free. And we have a role, again, as I said, to share this with people, to organize them, whether it be on a LibGuide, whether it be via a quick email to Professor so-and-so or the third grade teacher who is studying Cuba. You know, that's the type of thing, and this is what we should be doing more of.
I agree. Let's do a couple more countries. How about India? And when you just land in a country, it'll just bop through different regions, then you can explore cultures. It's just fantastic. If you really wanted to geek out as an ethnomusicologist or a music major, there's a lot of very insider language, but it's nice that it's lifted up and it's quite accessible for everybody. You know, I don't understand cantometrics or farlematics or all these other things that we're talking about, but would you agree, just on the surface, this is an incredible resource, right?
And you think about all the money, all the funding that goes into build this and other projects. One of the things that I've learned is a lot of the times the funding organization wants to know about what you plan to build, what you're going to do with it, but very often they don't ask, well, how are you going to get word out about it? Right. This is just, in many ways, collection development at a much higher level in terms of the volume of material and the amount of sources.
There's just two more things I want to point out about it. One, lesson plans. I mean, this is what we're talking about, K12, OER, integrating with those kind of things, those open curriculums. And then star songs and constellations. At first, when I was looking at this, is there astrological mapping? I didn't know what this was, or astronomical. No, star songs and constellations are constellations by types. So this is where, under the hood, they're using those Alan Lomax and other derived metrics to link musics that have traveled the world in songs and styles. So this would be plain and fancy. Then we can go to learn, and this would be learning about dynamics, soft and loud. Then you can learn about all alone and together, a constellation with a variety of ensemble sizes, Caribbean. So these are what they mean by constellations. It's just, wow, you could just spend hours here, and unfortunately we don't have hours, but we'll go from classic world music to new music. Our last open web tool of the day.
Go actually to the source.
Yeah.
Go to the underlying country, the city. And I am a media geek to the ultimate number. I love the idea. I mean, things that, for me, I'm sitting here with somebody from the UK, the idea as a kid that I can listen to the BBC, not on a shortwave radio, but it sounds just as good if I was sitting in Stephen's boyhood home somewhere in the UK. And I can do that now live, and not to mention all of the recorded Desert Island. We're both music geeks. The fact that I could listen to thousands of episodes of Desert Island discs back to the beginning is amazing.
So I'm going to just do the search. So imagine you go to our open web tools page, like, I wonder if these guys have collected anything around music. Well, you know we have. So I'm going to search here, just search music. And we got Music Brains, Recording Industry Association. Is this the one, the Global Jukebox?
No, we're doing World Radio Map.
Oh, okay. Could be, we haven't tagged our metadata well. Gary?
Yeah.
World Radio.
Put that one aside.
Hold on.
WorldRadioMap.com.
Radio, I know it's in here. Public Radio. World Media Directory?
No, we can do public
Radio browser? Look how many we have.
We can do Public Radio Fan. That's a great one.
Okay.
And, you know, people always ask, seriously, a common question is, well, that's great, but it's going to be gone tomorrow because it's not well funded. And this has been around for basically 20 years. I believe it's a sole proprietor, one person, you know, we were talking about earlier. individuals doing this kind of work. This is a tool that gives you moment by moment what's on public radio stations globally. So right now, pick a country, pick a state.
Let's pick a state. Nate, give me a state.
Connecticut.
Give me a state. Thank you, California. Let's listen to public radio in California.
So it serves as a directory, but also a live guide to what's on that particular station at that
Oh,
particular
one of my
moment.
favorites, KCRW.
Right. And you go directly
Support
to
comes
it.
from Searchlight Pictures, presenting The Menu,
Get the idea.
a darkly comedic thriller about an exclusive
So
restaurant.
public radio
with
fan,
chefs.
another one is called World Radio Map, same type of thing. Those they create a virtual dial for you.
Yeah. That's pretty much it from us. Enjoy open web tools, and we'll have Stephen close it out for us.
Thank you.
So we have 7 minutes, and rather than doing more slides, I think we should just open up to questions. So has anybody got questions or observations or thoughts? Warning, if you don't ask any questions, I've got more slides. So here they come.
Thank you.
Usually wait for all the smarter people. Is it on? Wait, what's on?
Now it's on. I'm booming. So you guys made this great tool. Well, how are you making money? What's your real job?
Well,
You keep emphasizing free,
right.
right?
Open Web Tools, one has the business purpose. We're using it with our clients at INFOdj, but it comes out of my work curating and it comes out of my work doing infodocket.com, which is the daily website I do for Library Journal, ARL Day in Review. So it's kind of a byproduct of that instead of just putting these resources everywhere, which I do, it's putting them all in one place. So it's paid for by INFOdj in terms of we're using it with our clients, and it just helps keep, and to a certain degree, it just helps keep me organized. If I'm going to link to it on InfoDocket, I might as well put it into a database and make it easier for myself and all of you to get access to it.
And to answer for Coherent Digital, the collections you see up on the slide deck here, each year we go into a subject area, whether that's Africa or South Asia or think tanks. We combine for fee materials with openly available materials. We make them openly accessible up to 20 searches per month. If you go north of 20 searches, we ask you to take a subscription. So that's how we monetize. I fear we're in between drinks.
I was just going to
so-
say, it's between you all and beverages.
That's right.
Right. So maybe we close.
Absolutely.
Good? All right.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.